Greetings, fellow scientists, and welcome to the Wisconsin Science Festival online field trip, Nature Explorers with the Aldo Leopold Nature Center. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. So after you can get situated and find a comfortable spot, we'll start on our field trip. Thank you again for joining us. Again, welcome everybody to the Wisconsin Science Festival online field trip Nature Explorers. We're here with the Aldo Leopold Nature Center, and we'll get started here in just a minute. We have Brian and Melissa with us. How can you participate today? Well, you'll notice that you are picture and audio muted, but if you have any questions that come into your minds while we're on our field trip, go ahead and type those into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll ask those questions on your behalf. So as soon as you have a question pop into your mind, go ahead and type that in. This field trip will be recorded, and as always, we ask that you do this in all activities at the Wisconsin Science Festival with a responsible adult. We'd also like to thank all our sponsors and partners that help make the Wisconsin Science Festival possible. You can find out more activities and events during the festival at wisconsinsciencefest.org, including joining in the Wisconsin Science Festival Bioblitz. So if you'd like to continue the nature exploring after this activity, you can download iNaturalist and start our Bioblitz, or go to the Bioblitz portal where you can find more activities to do from the Aldo Leopold Nature Center. And with that, we're very excited to take it away to Aldo Leopold Nature Center.
All right, welcome everybody to the Aldo Leopold Nature Center. My name is Brian Schneider.
Melissa Kiesling.
And we are environmental educators here at the Nature Center. Just a little personal background. So my background was in science. I was really interested in biology. And then later on realized that I also love the education aspect of outreach and science. So that led me here to the Aldo Leopold Nature Center, a perfect fusion of combining my interest of science with my love of education. And we're really excited to have you guys join us today to go on the virtual bird hike. So we'll talk about some of the birds that we see on our hike and also focus on migration. We'll focus on migration here in Wisconsin. I know we have people joining us from all around the state, which is awesome. We have a beautiful day here. It's about 50 degrees, breezy, partly sunny. And when you're talking about bird migration, weather has a big impact in that. So with that, if we want to look at the map, we can point out where we are. So we are located in Madison, Wisconsin right now. So right here at the south central part of the state. Yep, so right here. So I know we have folks joining us from all over the state. So we might be seeing some different colors out here today, different phenology events, so things that are happening in nature at different times. And so we are named after Aldo Leopold. So just a brief history of that. So Aldo Leopold was a naturalist. He lived in the late 1800s to the early 1800s. That's what we like to do here at the Nature Center, is carry on the Aldo Leopold legacy of teaching people to enjoy and understand what they see. So with that, I think we are going to shift our focus and talk about our topic of the day, which is migration. We have a poll question. So I think we can just start off with our first poll question so that we can dive into what migration is and how it works. So if we can pull up that first question.
All right, we'll give you guys some time to look at that one. But in the meantime, I think everyone will notice that we're seeing a lot of changes outside with the weather. Fall is here, so daylight's getting shorter, and that causes a lot of things to change around the Nature Center, especially with movement of different animals and stuff as they're getting ready for winter. So I just wanted to show you this really quick. So we live in a pretty unique spot in the country where we happen to be on the path of a lot of migrating birds, which makes it pretty spectacular place. If you like birds like me and Brian, in the spring is really exciting, and in the fall is really exciting too. But if you notice, a lot of the lines are going from up by Alaska, which I think we have a group from Alaska, right? So way up here, and then you'll notice a lot of them will go all the way down to South America. And these flyways, which they're called, they're kind of like super highways, and it makes it easier for the birds to move along those paths. And it could be like geographical features, other things that are helping them get from one point to another without using too much energy. And we happen to be near one of them. So we get a great mix of birds that are coming to hang out normally in Central and South America in the wintertime. And then a lot of them breed up in Canada, and they just kind of pass right over us on their way. So that was the spring. And then now that it's fall, a lot of them that have been here, they're starting to make their way back down as they make their way down to warmer waters. And sometimes it's hard to tell, but for us, sometimes when birds migrate, a lot of times people think, oh, they all go somewhere south, really warm. There are birds that come like from Canada to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is warm enough for them in the winter. So yes, flyway map.
So when we use the word migration, we're talking about seasonal movement from one place to another. As Melissa said, that could be really long distances, that could be short distances. But we're going to talk about why birds migrate, why they're doing that seasonal movement.
And the result of the poll question showed that people think that there are many reasons why birds migrate. All of them that were listed. That was the winning choice. Finding appropriate space to nest and raise young, to find a reliable food source, and to avoid harsh weather conditions.
Great job.
That's absolutely correct.
Yep.
So a lot of people think birds migrate solely because of cold weather. And normally that's not the case. Some birds would struggle with colder weather, especially here in Wisconsin. But most of the time, migration is due to food source, so find reliable food. Here in Wisconsin in the wintertime, we're not having our berries in bloom, our flowers that are on trees, so birds that are eating berries and nectar, they need to move on to find a different food source. Birds that are eating insects need to move on to find a different food source. We don't see many insects in the winter. And then also some of our birds that wouldn't be able to handle that colder Wisconsin weather need to move as well. So there's a lot of different reasons for migrating. And then the reason why birds wouldn't just stay down in warmer weather all year round and why they migrate back north is so that they have room to nest and for their breeding season. So when the birds are migrating north, there's plenty of space up throughout Wisconsin and then further up north into Canada and the Arctic for them to find what they eat and have enough space to do so. So those are the main drivers of migration and why birds are doing that at that time of the year.
And I don't know if anyone knows this, but there are over 10,000 different species of birds in the entire world. And they figure only about 40% of them actually migrate. So there are a lot of birds that can stay where they are if they're getting all their needs met. But there's a huge group, so over 4,000 species actually migrate.
And I think those birds might need to start to get going because I'm on the west side of Madison and it has just started to snow.
What?
Oh, wow.
Okay,
well,
that's
maybe
a surprise.
That's a sign of what we can expect here in about 5 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah, so a question people always ask too is like, well, how do birds know to go to one spot, or how do birds know when it's time to leave? And scientists, they're still working on it, but they think that some of the reasons birds know when to go is if you know, in fall we get less daylight, and that can kind of, it's like a photo period response. They'll respond to that. They also respond to temperature. They can also, they can use the Earth's magnetic field. So like when we have compasses, the needles point north, birds can sense that. They have like a special mineral or is an element in their bills. And then also they think some birds, it's just when they're born, they know where to go, because things like ruby-throated hummingbirds, they actually will leave on their own. And even on the first year, they go by themselves. So they have to somehow know where to go. So
something that scientists are still researching, and it's a really cool field to go into and study. How do birds know when to migrate and how do they know where to go? Some birds have been studied and they follow the exact same path, stopping at the same stopping points every time they migrate. And then they end up at the same exact breeding ground. So it's really interesting, really cool field of study. So when we go on our hike here, we're gonna visit our prairie habitat. So as we go along, we might see some birds that are here year round. We might see some birds that are migrating. And we'll do our best to point them out so that you guys can see them on the screen, and we'll talk about. We also do have some flashcards that make it easier to see a picture of the bird that we hope to see along the way.
Yep. Oh, and then we could start our next poll question as we're going, and then we'll go over the answers. So we have some birds that are kind of on the ground up ahead. I don't know if you guys can see them or not. I'm gonna try to find a card here too. Maybe some of you will know this bird, especially if you live in Wisconsin. It is our state bird, that's correct.
Aldo Leopold Nature Center, I might interject, and I wonder if the audio is a little bit disconnected.
Ask if they can hear you now. Somebody just commented.
I can hear you.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
We can. I think the microphone might be not picking up you from the earbud, but I can hear you through the phone.
Or you can hear us through the phone. Okay.
Yes.
I don't think
Earbuds.
the earbuds are connected.
Did the earbuds disconnect?
Yeah. Okay, well, we can stand closer to the phone. So just curious, is that poll question up right now?
Put them back in and try again.
Not yet. We will launch
Okay.
it here.
So we were just looking, we were pointing out some American robins on the ground and saying that that is our state bird. And that's a bird that we can see frequently in Wisconsin throughout the year. But our next poll question is going to focus on how many birds we can see in Wisconsin throughout the year.
Awesome.
Can you
So
guys
we're
hear us okay now? Okay.
yes, we can hear you, and the poll is
Okay.
launched.
Right.
And so on average, how many bird species are recorded in Wisconsin each year?
The speakers would.
And the choices are 150, 250, 350, and 550. And I'm just going to go to our producer here and see which one people chose the most.
So we're still waiting on the answers for question number 2.
Yeah, I think we're trying to get footage of this. There are lots of birds flying around. I feel like maybe they know the weather is going to get sour soon here. But we're seeing a couple of species that actually come down here for the winter. One of the ones that come down just for the winter, they're called juncos. And they will usually come down about now and then they'll leave in the spring. It's a gray bird, and then one way that you could tell it's a junco is when it flies, it'll have white on its tail. Let's see if I can find a picture of it here. But Brian, what other birds are you seeing that can pull parts?
Yeah, I don't know if they can see our screen right now, but right now like Melissa said, we're seeing a lot of movement in these trees in front of us. And that might have to do with the weather that's about to change.
Yes.
Seeing a combination of American robins, northern cardinals, white-throated sparrows, which actually, if you can hear in the earbud, that is the one that is singing right now. We are seeing cedar waxwings. So a good variety right here of some birds that are here year-round and some migrants that are just passing through.
So I can show you
And
some
we do
pictures
have
of
the
birds.
results of our poll question.
Perfect.
Perfect.
And yes, people think that there are a lot of species. The most was 550 bird species recorded in Wisconsin
Yes,
each
what are some
year.
of the birds that
And we have some fourth graders that are also learning about robins as well.
Oh, nice.
Perfect.
Awesome. So we do have many bird species that visit Wisconsin every year. However, it's roughly 350. So that correct answer there was C. And again, that can change year to year. Some year it might be around 340 that are recorded. I think Wisconsin's record for the most recorded in a year was 380. So roughly somewhere in that 350 range, and that's including birds that are here year round, that do not leave at all, but not migrants, stay in the same area the whole time. That's including birds that we can reliably see passing through and nesting here in migration season, but then they leave us for the winter. That includes birds that show up to Wisconsin for the winter. And that also includes birds that might just be lost and show up and be seen in Wisconsin for one day. So we get a combination of all those birds in Wisconsin every year, and every year turns out to be about 350. So I think I heard one of the questions posted in the chat is what birds that we're seeing right now are migrants. So the one that, again, the one I said that we can hear singing is the white-throated sparrow. So Melissa has a picture of that she can hold up. So there are lots of different species of sparrows. Some nest in Wisconsin all year. Some are just passing through on migration. This is an example of one that is a migrant. So we see it in the springtime. It will fly through this area of Madison, usually late April, early May during peak migration, but then they keep moving further north and they'll go up into northern Wisconsin, Canada for breeding. And now they're coming back down south and they'll keep moving south. Not too much further south than us. We can still see a white-throated sparrow in the winter every now and then, but most of them will keep moving towards like central United States.
The junco, that was one we said we heard. That's this one, and that's the one that they migrate to us. So we'll get these in the winter time. They're really fun. And then
I think that that snow squall.
yeah. And then this is a cedar waxwing. Brian had mentioned there's a bunch of those flying around right now. And then he said he saw a cardinal. So I just want to show you a picture of a cardinal too. And I don't know if everyone here has seen a cardinal. West Coast, they don't get them. So I don't know if maybe people in Alaska, if you've seen a cardinal before, they're up there. Anyways.
One more thing to add to that with bird identification and with migration. Bird identification can be hard, and as hard as it is, it's even harder that they change what they look like throughout the year. So we're lucky that cardinals, they stay the same. They don't change their what we call plumage or what they look like year round. They'll be red all year round, and the female will be that brownish gray year round. But some birds turn bright colors in the spring and summertime, and then they molt and lose some of their feathers, and they turn a duller color in the wintertime. And there is a bird that does that stays here year round, and that's the American goldfinch. So if we see that today, we'll point it out, but we're used to seeing goldfinches be this bright yellow gold color in the summertime. And then some people think that they migrate or disappear because we don't notice that in the winter. It's actually that they change their feathers to a dull color so they don't stand out as much. And they will be here year round because they can find their food source, which is seeds. So we will head through the prairie now. So we start to be on the lookout for birds that call the prairie home and find food in the prairie. So mainly that's birds that eat insects. But again, with our weather changing, getting colder, we're starting to see fewer insects. So birds that are eating insects are probably start to migrate south if they haven't already. But then the birds that are here year round will be able to find seeds in these prairie plants. We have a wide variety of prairie plants here, and a lot of them have seeds all winter long that the birds can find food from.
This is a typical fall day in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, it'll be sunny and gorgeous, and the next minute it'll be almost snowing like snow.
So speaking of goldfinches, right on cue as we head into the prairie, probably hard to see, but there are a few birds moving around here at the tops of the prairie plants. And I'm seeing a goldfinch right now. So it's in that typical winter plumage, dull olive green. But what does stand out is the black and white wing bars on those goldfinches. We apologize if our audio is windy, but the wind really picked up in the last few minutes here.
Yeah, Dan, whatever you have, it's here now. So
Yes, it certainly did. It turned into a little bit of rain here. So yeah, the snow is coming your way.
it's raining now.
Dropped a few degrees and the wind picks up 2 miles per hour. So like I mentioned at the start, weather is an important factor when it comes to migration. So birds, and this is another thing scientists are studying, birds tend to know when the best time to migrate is when it comes to weather patterns. So let's say birds right now, they're migrating south. They're coming from the north and migrating south. They're going to take 9 to 4 days whenever they migrate, where the wind is at their back. So right now, the wind coming from the north, moving south, that would be a good indicator for birds to take that tailwind and use it to their advantage and fly south. The opposite thing happens in the springtime. Birds coming up from the south tend to find nights and days where we're getting those warm winds from the south, and they'll come up those nights. Birds will use weather to their advantage to migrate. Migration is a very difficult process. We'll talk about it at the end. But any advantage that birds can find while they're migrating, they'll use.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about why it's important to make observations about nature and weather to help us understand what they're doing, because I think you know, maybe birds use some things to their advantage, but maybe some things are disadvantageous year to year or changes. And how do these living things deal with the changing world?
Of course, yeah, that's a great question, and something that Aldo Leopold would do is keep records. So that word that I said earlier, phenology, is the study of when things happen in nature. And Aldo Leopold in his journals would write down the specific dates he was seeing migratory birds show up in the springtime, the first time he would see them, and then keeping track of when he would see them in the fall to know the last date that they would leave. And it's important to keep records because we can look back 100 years ago, 200 years ago, what people were seeing then versus what we're seeing today. And that way we can notice changes and we can ask questions of, well, why are those changes occurring? For example, there's a number of species that Aldo Leopold would keep track of that would arrive in the springtime that today they're arriving on average 2 weeks earlier. And they're also leaving about 2 weeks later in the fall. So when we notice that change and notice that pattern as scientists, we can say, all right, well, we notice this, what's causing this to happen? And so scientists are connecting animal movement, specifically bird migration, to a changing climate. So a general warming climate will cause plants to bloom earlier and stay in bloom later in the fall. So in turn, that's allowing the birds to come here earlier and leave later. But also weather changes day to day. Weather is chaotic. It's not a long-term pattern. So if we have birds that are staying later into fall than what they normally do, and we have, let's say, a day where we have a atypically cold day, or if it's a snowy day, that's going to affect those birds that are here when normally they would be gone. Or the same in the springtime when they're coming 2 weeks earlier. And because the climate has shifted and it's generally warmer in early May, we might still get those cold days. And that could be problematic for some of those birds that are showing up early.
We actually had our bluebird population is actually kind of hurting right now because last year when they were migrating from the south, Texas had these really bad storms all along like the Gulf Coast, and it was ice and snow, and a lot of the birds didn't make it. And we're still noticing issues like this year during the breeding season based on something that happened last year. So those are things that we can see just like as a direct result right away. And then we're also noticing too that So Brian and I were avid birders in the area, and we're noticing now that birds that would be like super duper rare like 50 years ago, we're getting them once or twice a year now. So things like that weren't as common before, they're starting to show up more often now. Which, I mean, it's exciting for us if we get to see a new bird, but then it's also kind of worrisome because that means things are happening. Yes. Exactly. All right, we're gonna head down towards the pond eventually. Were there any other questions, Dan, that came up in the chat?
Yeah, so that was one of the question about the dates changing, perhaps with the climate changing. And there's a question of, do they all go at the same time in groups? Are they kind of watching what other birds are doing too, in addition to the weather?
Well, I feel like different bird groups tend to move together. Like for us, starting in August, we'll start to get shorebirds, which are birds that normally live along the water. They're the first group to come through. And then we just had a bunch of warblers and other songbirds coming through. And now that they're starting to kind of taper off, the next group of birds coming in is going to start to be like ducks and things like that. So I don't know, will we have our snow now, Dan, too? I don't know if, like, I feel like in the fall too, I see more mixed, like I'll see warblers, but I'll see like 20 different warblers all together. So I feel like they kind of move in a group, but it's not all identical birds with them. Were there any other questions?
That's all the questions so far in the chat. And I'd just like to share too that we have enabled the live transcript. So there'll be a closed captioning underneath with the live transcript if people are interested in turning that on.
So as we're walking here, just to elaborate on that question of timing, of how birds' habitats are shifting. Another thing is when we realize that these birds are migrating through Wisconsin or coming to Wisconsin, they're also spending a lot of their time throughout the year in places like northern Canada, Alaska, and then also down in South America. So when it comes to us wanting to protect habitat, it's a worldwide issue with these birds. It's not like we can only help these birds by restoring our habitat here. They need habitat in their breeding grounds, they need habitat in their wintering grounds, and then everywhere in between. So it's connecting communities, and one of my favorite things to think about is that when we get birds showing up in May here at the Aldo Leopold Nature Center or in my backyard, some of those birds are in people's backyards in Brazil 2 or 3 weeks earlier, a month earlier. So, and every stop in between. So that's one of my favorite things about birds is connecting of people and communities and thinking about how they travel along the way.
Yeah, I had an interesting year with that because in March, I went to Alabama with my family for spring break. And then all the warblers were starting to come up from South America. So I saw a bunch of birds then. And then I came back home and I got to see all the same birds again in May. And then we went to Canada over the summer to go fishing and I saw the same birds again up north, but it was really cool because once they got onto their breeding grounds, I heard birds sing that I hadn't heard sing before. So it was a very interesting thing where I kind of got to follow the birds all the way up.
Wow, so it's like you migrated with them.
I did. I would have kept going, but I had to come back.
So we are now arriving at our pond wetland habitat here at the Nature Center. When we look at wetland birds, so ducks, geese, other types of waterfowl, and shorebirds, birds that use water, most of them have to migrate because here in Wisconsin, most of our lakes freeze over. So they're migrating to wherever they can find open water. And again, talking about climate shifting, in the last 50 years, we're seeing the amount of ice here in Madison on our big lakes, Lake Mendota, has decreased. So we're seeing ice forming later in the year and then melting earlier. So the timing of those waterfowl and shorebirds, they're here whenever there's open water. They don't really mind the cold weather. So in the past couple of winters, we've been seeing birds through January that would normally be gone by early December because of the ice freezing over. but if you ever want to find water birds in the winter, go to wherever you can find open water. That's a good spot to see a concentration of different types of ducks and geese.
Yeah, we were both teaching earlier today. And of course, when we were here earlier, there was like 30 geese on here and we tried to get them to stay. But as you can see, they decided the weather's too gross and they are out. So, but we'll get geese on this pond. Canada geese will get mallard ducks. Sometimes we'll get like a wood duck or a bird called a pied-billed grebe every once in a while. A lot of times we'll have herons kind of walking along the edges. And a lot of swallows in the summertime. And swallows are really fun because they fly around really fast trying to get insects and they'll skim like right above the water. Like it looks like they're going to crash into the water and they don't. So this is a great habitat for that, especially with all the grasses and stuff around the edges.
That's a wonderful segue into a question that we had, which is actually about the Aldo Leopold Nature Center itself. And what other kinds of experiences can people have there? And maybe you could talk a little bit about why it's important to be a steward of the land where you are at right now, to have water and various types of habitats for living things.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So we're based in Monona. We're a small nature center, which it's pretty special. Like the way I found this place was my kid got invited to a birthday party and we live 20 minutes from here. And I didn't know this place was here because we're surrounded by city. And so we kind of have this nice little pocket of undeveloped land and we're like 15 acres and we have 2 parks that are on each end of us. So we have kind of a big space here. Brian and I are both teachers here and we'll teach anywhere from 3-year-olds up to high school. Because one of our big things here is just helping people connect to nature. Because if you can connect and you can appreciate, and then you'll have more respect for nature and kind of have that drive to want to protect this awesome place. And we're open to the public, so anybody that's close to us, there's no charge. You can come and hike the trails whenever you want. We have stuff in the lobby if you want to go dip in our pond. We have binoculars if you want to look for birds. But we just try to make this place very open. Anybody can come and just kind of explore this cool little spot that we have.
Yes, our programming includes field trips throughout the year, different school groups. We do summer camps all summer long. We have homeschool programs throughout the week. We have a nature preschool. And like Melissa said, it's free to just come here and go inside and outside. So there are lots of different opportunities to come here.
Yeah, it keeps Brian and I on our toes because we never know like what programs we're gonna have that week, which makes it really fun because it's just fun to get people outside. So I didn't go over it earlier, but my background was I was a classroom teacher for 10 years. And then I really like being outside. And so me getting to work here is kind of like the best of both worlds. So I get to be outside every day. I'm working with kids. We're outside in nature. Like it's perfect. So, all right, we're going to try to walk a little towards the woods to get a little shelter maybe.
Yeah, we might see some more bird activity in the woods with the shelter. As we said, right when we started our hike, we were noticing lots of bird activity, and that was right before this like rain, snow, sleet came through. So I think the birds were frantically trying to feed, and then they're just hunkering down right now with the weather. Although I do, if we can just move over here to this juniper tree, I've seen some movement of one of my favorite birds. They're really beautifully colored. And these are birds that we can see year round. So down here on the lower branches, they are in a juniper tree, so they're eating juniper berries. These are called cedar waxwings. And so they are finding berries on evergreen trees. So they'll be here all year round. They can be short distant migrants in a particularly harsh winter. They might flock further south just a little bit. But these are really cool birds they kind of have a black stripe through their face, looks like they're wearing a mask, and a yellow tip along the bottom of their tail. And if you can see right now, they're pulling those juniper berries off of the tree, getting their food source right now. It looks like right in the front center there is a younger one that was born earlier this year. It hasn't fully developed its adult plumage yet.
That is so wonderful. I just want to say how cozy it is for me watching these birds in the snow while I'm nice and warm inside. I appreciate you
Because it's
take,
the transcript.
taking us on this adventure.
If you like watching birds, there are a lot of really cool bird camps too. There's a lot of great resources. Like if you feel like you're in a spot where it's either too cold to get outside or it's just you don't feel like you have some good nature, which birds are everywhere. You'd be surprised where you can find them. There's a lot of really cool bird camps. Like we even have one for Madison that for a pair of peregrine falcons. So that's really fun too. This is a close-up of the cedar waxwing that Brian was talking about. So, but here's that where he was talking about like the yellow on the tail. And then these feathers here, they're specialized feathers, and it does look like there's little bits of wax at the end. So that's part of where they get to. All right.
How interesting. And I'm curious about those distinctive features you can see with your eyes are a very nice way to identify the birds. But do you use your ears or any of your other senses to help you observe?
For sure. Like, so Brian's been birding a little bit longer than me, but I think like as I learned, it was first learning by looking at them, and kind of the things that I would look for would be what color is the bird, where's the bird at, and kind of like the basic size and shape, so that when I had a question, I could send him this information and he could tell me what bird I saw. But then as you get more experience, it is nice to be able to use sound too. But that's a tough one for me.
Yeah, during certain times of the year, especially summertime when all the trees are leafed out and you're seeing these birds flicking around in the canopy, really sound is the only way you're going to be able to identify them if you can't get a good look. So yeah, when it comes to bird ID, there's lots of different ways and strategies to use, and sound is definitely a great way. They'll be singing. They have different songs that they sing during breeding time, and then they have calls and other sounds that they make, just other communications between themselves. So they'll be vocalizing pretty much throughout the whole year. So that helps to identify them. I think too, it's okay to just go out and look at birds and not know the name of them and just appreciate. Like I saw this red bird with black wings, and I mean it's okay if you don't know the name, right? But just going out there and noticing and seeing them is really fun too. So yeah, with over 350 species that come through Wisconsin every year, it's overwhelming if you go out your first time hiking and want to try to identify every single one. But if you just go out and you notice some of the patterns you're seeing, some of the colors, like Melissa said, the size and the shape, and then you can work your way towards trying to identify later on. But just enjoying the presence of the birds as you're hiking around is something I enjoy.
well, as we get over here, hopefully we'll see some more birds. I can hear some stuff, but we wanted to talk a little bit about like migration, and there's a lot of really cool technology out there that will help you like predict what birds are showing up, and it'll tell you how many birds are going across, and it's really cool. So it's something called Birdcast, and it's through Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and also I think it's University of Colorado. And they work together, or Colorado State. One of the two, yeah. And they will make forecasts, and this is actually the forecast for tonight. So you can go online, and they'll give you a couple-day predictions. And the lighter it is, the more excitement that's happening. So you can tell though, kind of we're towards the end of our migration period here, but down south, they're just starting to get into the good spots here. And this is when we talked about the flyways earlier. You can kind of see that there is like a general trend where they kind of go in one little section here. And this website's really awesome just because there's so many different things you can do. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but I did this. They have this dashboard and it's live, and this is for Wisconsin. So you can go to, if you're in Alaska, you can look up Alaska. If you are in Minnesota, you can look up Minnesota. But it'll tell you like the number of birds that are crossing through, which ones you can expect to see. They even know what elevation they're flying at. Like it's pretty crazy what they can come up with. And like for Wisconsin, you have it written down. I wrote down like the number of birds that were just passing through like each migration period. Um, and it was just kind of, it was cool to see how big the numbers were.
Since August, 625 million birds have flown over Wisconsin.
Over Wisconsin, yeah.
Wow, that
And then in
air
the spring,
traffic
it was, like,
controller
huge
is
numbers.
very busy with all of those
Yeah.
flights. Wow. And the altitudes that they can measure the birds at, that's fascinating to think about.
And some birds they'll migrate at night, like a lot of the little songbirds that we think of. And then some of them, like raptors, will actually migrate during the day. So it depends on the time of day, the amount of movement. Some birds will migrate really low and they're loud. There's a bird called the bar-headed goose. It flies 5.5 miles above sea level when it migrates. All right, so it just kind of depends on the species for when it's going to move. So
I think we just have a few
we
minutes.
have one more poll question.
We can wrap up our last poll question with that migration that we talked about. If we have 1 minute to go over that.
We do. So that poll question is, which bird has the longest migration route in the world? The Arctic tern, the northern cardinal, the wandering albatross, or the ruby-throated hummingbird? And it looks like we have a result. The northern cardinal, perhaps?
All right. So the northern cardinal is actually a bird that does not migrate. So we can see the northern cardinal year-round here in Wisconsin. The bird with the longest migration route in the world is the Arctic tern, which spends its summers and breeding grounds up in the Arctic, and then it will fly down and spend the winter down in the Antarctic. So it goes about 56,000 miles, and it does that trip every single year. So it's just a constant circling of the globe for the Arctic tern. And that's a bird that's smaller than a red-tailed hawk that we see here. So it's really amazing how birds can travel so far and every single year. So if you think about an Arctic tern that can live up to 30 years old and it's traveling 56,000 miles every year, think about the miles that bird has put on in its lifetime.
And migration is dangerous too for birds. They think maybe like 50% of the birds won't make it through an entire year. And that usually includes when they're going, like during migration routes and everything. So like dangers for migration around when they're moving, we have a lot of window collisions, unfortunately, where they might collide with like radio towers and stuff like that. And they're trying to work on different ways to help prevent that. And there actually is citizen science things that you can do to help with that stuff too. So.
Getting big cities to turn the lights off.
Yep.
That is, yeah, that is so inspiring to see how connected everything is when we just look outside our window and we can see these living things that give us a perspective on the whole world. And I just think that's wonderful. And I want to thank you all. We're at the time to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us at the Wisconsin Science Festival with the Aldo Leopold Nature Center and being nature explorers with us. Melissa and Brian, thank you so much for showing us a little bit about where you work and why you do what you do, and help us get inspired to go outside and explore for ourselves.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us.
Please come visit us.
Yeah. Bye.